All right, so today we're going to deep dive into this piece called "The Future of the Ukraine Conflict in 2025: What Lies Ahead and How You Can Help."
Yeah, sounds pretty heavy.
Yeah, it's a fascinating look ahead, and 2025 is just around the corner. So
Hmm.
trying to predict where things might be headed, especially with this conflict,
Yeah.
is pretty important, I think.
Yeah, especially I mean with the kind of the way the landscape is shifting and
Hmm.
the different types of warfare that are going on. It's very complex.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm interested to see what this piece has to say.
Yeah, me too. And one of the things that really jumped out at me was this idea that um, Ukraine's counteroffensive.
Yeah.
They've been pushing back against Russia, obviously, and they've had some successes.
Right.
But the piece is predicting that those efforts are really going to intensify in 2025.
Hmm.
And obviously a big part of that is going to be continued Western support.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've seen how crucial military aid is. It's been a determining factor in so many conflicts throughout history.
Right, right.
And I mean, just looking at the sheer volume of equipment and training that Ukraine's allies have provided, I mean, it's unprecedented.
Yeah, absolutely. And that the piece also predicts that Russia might actually start facing some critical shortages.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in terms of artillery and tanks by 2025.
Hmm. So what happens then? I mean, if they're running low on conventional, firepower.
Well, that's what I was wondering too. I mean, how do they adapt?
Well, that's where things I think get a little bit more unsettling
Oh,
because
yeah.
the piece suggests that this is where they might really double down on what's called hybrid warfare.
Hybrid warfare.
Yeah.
Okay, now, for our listener out there who might not be totally familiar with that term,
Sure.
can you just sort of unpack that a
Yeah,
little bit?
absolutely. I mean, hybrid warfare, it's not your sort of traditional battlefield, tanks and troops kind of thing.
Right.
It's much more multifaceted.
Okay.
It combines those traditional military tactics with unconventional methods, things that are often covert and
Hmm.
and really designed to kind of exploit vulnerabilities within a society.
Hmm.
So, using things like disinformation campaigns or cyber attacks to sow discord,
Hmm.
to undermine stability.
So it's almost like a psychological kind of warfare in a way.
Yeah, exactly. It's about influencing perceptions
Okay,
and manipulating information to achieve strategic goals.
that's really interesting. And the piece actually highlights three specific tactics that we might see more of in 2025.
Okay.
First one being intensified disinformation campaigns.
Right. So, I mean, we've already seen how Russia has been using disinformation, to try to shape the narrative around this conflict.
Hmm.
But what this piece suggests is that they might actually start to exploit economic anxieties, particularly in Europe,
Okay.
and essentially try to pin the blame for those anxieties on support for Ukraine.
So kind of like sanctions are hurting you more than they're hurting us kind of thing.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So imagine, you start seeing a lot of these carefully crafted articles or social media posts that are claiming, that rising energy prices or job losses are all because of the sanctions that have been imposed on Russia.
Oh, wow.
And that this is all, because of your government supporting Ukraine.
Do you really think that could be effective, though? I
Yeah.
mean, in today's world, everybody's got access to so much information. It just seems like it would be really hard to control that narrative.
I mean, you're right. It's not about outright manipulation anymore. It's
Oh,
about exploiting anxieties that already exist.
right.
And kind of amplifying fringe voices.
Hmm.
So, if people are already worried about their jobs or about the economy,
Yeah.
even a slightly exaggerated narrative or a misleading statistic,
Right.
that can really take root and spread like wildfire online.
And that can lead to, people losing trust in their governments.
Absolutely. It can erode trust in institutions. It can
Yeah.
fuel divisions within societies.
And ultimately weaken that resolve to continue supporting Ukraine.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's a pretty worrying thought.
Yeah.
Um, the next tactic that the piece talks about is cyber attacks.
Right. So this is where things get even more serious potentially,
Oh,
because
yeah.
we could see an increase in attacks on critical infrastructure.
Hmm.
Things like power grids, financial institutions, communication networks.
So basically anything that relies on, technology and the internet.
Exactly. I mean, just imagine, a well-coordinated ransomware attack that cripples a major European stock exchange
Oh, wow.
or disrupts energy supplies during a harsh winter.
Yeah.
I mean, these attacks wouldn't just cause economic chaos.
Right,
They could
yeah.
have a huge psychological impact, creating a sense of vulnerability and fear.
So no more, online shopping sprees if the financial systems go down.
Right.
But seriously, though, this sounds like a real threat.
It is a real threat, and it's something that governments and organizations are, increasingly having to grapple with
Right.
because the sophistication of these attacks is constantly evolving.
Yeah, and the third tactic that the piece highlights kind of plays on Europe's reliance on Russian energy.
Right, leveraging energy dependence.
Exactly.
So essentially the idea is that Russia could use its influence over alternative energy sources.
Great.
Perhaps by disrupting supplies or manipulating prices to really pressure European nations.
And potentially, drive a wedge between them.
Exactly, because if countries start to prioritize their own energy security
Right.
over, unified support for Ukraine,
Yeah.
that could really play into Russia's hands.
So it really sounds like all of this is about breaking down European unity.
It's a way to try to exploit those internal divisions. And we've already seen some narratives emerge, things like sanctions fatigue or concerns about the influx of refugees. And these are all things that Russia can potentially exploit.
So how can Europe withstand this kind of pressure?
Well, the report does highlight, Europe's resilience.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they've been taking steps to counter these tactics.
Okay.
They're investing in strategic communication to try to debunk disinformation. They're bolstering their cybersecurity infrastructure.
Right.
And they're working to diversify their energy sources.
Just trying to kind of, get ahead of the curve.
Exactly. And we've also seen that public support for Ukraine has remained relatively strong across Europe.
Okay, so that's a bit of a hopeful sign.
It is, but, these are ongoing challenges.
Yeah.
And the pressure is unlikely to let up in 2025.
So it sounds like it could be a really pivotal year,
Absolutely.
with Ukraine intensifying its counteroffensive.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, Russia leaning more and more heavily on these hybrid warfare tactics.
Yeah, it's a very complex situation.
It is.
And it raises a crucial question for all of us, really. If hybrid warfare becomes the defining feature of future conflicts, what new strategies and skills are we going to need to counter it?
Right. I mean, this goes way beyond traditional military doctrines.
Exactly.
This is about understanding information warfare, cybersecurity, social psychology.
It's a whole new battleground.
It is. And it demands, innovative thinking and a proactive approach.
Absolutely.
Well, that's certainly a fascinating and perhaps somewhat unsettling thought to leave our listener with.
Yeah, I think it's something we all need to be thinking about.
Absolutely. The future of conflict is changing.
It is.
And understanding these shifts is crucial for all of us as we navigate this increasingly complex world.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive,
My pleasure.
and we'll see you next time.
See you then.